Hi, it's Rupert here from Action Coach Nick in Ross, and I'm joined today by Matthew Norbury of FC Laboratories. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, Rupert.
So,
Delighted to be here.
so tell us, Matthew, who or what are FC Laboratories?
FC Labs, as we shorten it to, is a wearable neurotech company. I'm the founder and CEO, and I am not a technical founder of what is a very, very technical company. I'm from a marketing background, actually, but thankfully I had enough connections, enough charm, some might say, to persuade a team of people who are technical experts in the field of wearable neurotech to come on board. So in a nutshell, we use near infrared light in a tiny, very small, very lightweight device that we've developed to look at blood flow and oxygenation levels in the prefrontal cortex area of the brain. And using that data and the power of AI and machine learning, we can give you real-time data and insights into your brain fitness and performance. That's us in a nutshell.
Fantastic. So, a fascinating subject, but how did you get into it?
How long have we got on this? Yeah, it is a big leap. So previously I was running a marketing agency with my wife. Jump Marketing was going for many years, working with people all over the world, had some fantastic times. My wife decided to step back in about 2015 it was, and I was somewhat jealous, actually, I must admit. I was like, I want to go off and do new interesting things as well. So I carried on running Jump, but I also started to do some consultancy work, essentially as a kind of a fractional CMO, you might call it nowadays. Back then, I didn't even know that that's what you would call it, but now I do. Fractional CMO for a number of startups, including a couple who were working in the space of wearable brain imaging, but using EEG, so using electrical activity, looking at electrical activity in the brain, and using that to help people to sleep better. So it was a consumer sleep device they were trying to develop. Long story short, they couldn't make the tech work and they ran out of money, but it exposed me to an issue which some weird coincidences and chats over a number of months, friends and family, the issue of fatigue in the workplace, and particularly in high-risk sectors like oil and gas, like engineering, like construction, where if you are fatigued, as we all know, it's like driving a car while you're drunk if you're driving while you're fatigued. So in high-risk environments where you need to pay attention, you need to be focused, you need to be making decisions effectively, if you are fatigued, bad things happen. So that was the seed of the idea, that big problem, no satisfactory solution. I thought that wearable brain imaging might be able to help. What we do now is a direct development of that, but the key realization really was that fatigue isn't the problem. The problem is what happens to the brain when it's fatigued. But there are also other things which have a negative impact on the brain, like stress or lack of physical activity, or too much physical activity, or heat or cold, or dehydration, whole host of things. So what we do, rather than just measuring the influencing factors such as fatigue, we measure the impact on the brain. That's what we do. So it was that very sort of serendipitous number of chats, one particular discussion with a friend of mine over a cup of tea. He was from the construction sector. That was the one that I always look back at as the key point where I thought, yeah, there might be something here worth exploring. And then, like many people, when COVID came along, it sort of gave me that nudge that I needed to make the leap.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a huge area, and I mean, you're just talking there about the impact on the ability to make good decisions, and just this morning I was talking with some clients about the very simple mnemonic that the NHS use when they're making, if they're faced with making a critical decision, and in healthcare they're doing that quite a bit, they ask
Mm.
themselves to halt, and they ask themselves the question, am I hungry, angry, late, or tired? And it's a very simple piece that says, you know, are any of those four factors which might well degrade my ability to make a decision present?
Mhm.
But you're getting straight into actually being able to make that measurable.
Yeah, exactly. And the potential for NHS is a good example. Actually, that self-awareness and self-assessment is great. The fact that people are being encouraged to consider, it's I suppose it's a key rule of any sort of health and safety process. If a warning light goes off on a piece of machinery or a piece of plant, first thing you do is stop and consider, explore, fix it, make sure everything's okay, then you carry on. So we're a bit like that red warning light, but for the human brain. And rather than relying on self-assessment, which humans are notoriously bad at, if they feel like it's getting in the way as well, if they're thinking, I haven't got time for this, like that, it takes a lot of self-discipline and a lot of self-awareness for that approach to be genuinely effective, really. So taking that room for human error at the end of the day out of it with objective empirical data. That's fundamentally our innovation and how it can transform a whole number of, particularly in the workplace, that's our focus, but a whole number of problems, that risk of human error just being one of them in high risk environments like NHS or oil and gas. Human error is a factor in almost all workplace incidents and accidents and mistakes. It's a huge problem, and it's very much what we can measure for the first time. So yeah.
So you've seen the potential of this. You've been exposed to the technology. You've seen the potential of it. Um, as a company, you've been running just over 5 years. Early on in that journey, COVID's come along, given you the opportunity, the headspace, um, the impetus to get started. But how do you take something like this to market?
It's a great question. So we are still very much on track with that original plan, that original problem, and market opportunity that we identified, being high risk sectors like construction, like oil and gas, like engineering, manufacturing, logistics, and so on, where I suppose there's two main factors that keep those still as our priority. First one is that people are already often wearing something on their heads that we can attach our technology to, which is a barrier. If we're asking people to wear something on their heads that they don't already do, that's a barrier to adoption. So wear hard hats and bump caps and even baseball caps in many of these environments. Very common. We can attach our technology to it, but there's also the willingness, if the risk is there and accepted. PPE is common. So being asked to wear a cap that's got our tech integrated into it would not be a huge barrier. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the risk of low or impaired brain fitness due to factors such as stress or fatigue or heat or cold or dehydration, all these other things. The risks are high because those factors are present to a degree more than lots of other jobs. Like me sitting at home, I can quite easily adjust the temperature of the room and I can go and get a glass of water from the kitchen. It's so those factors are less of a concern. But also, and perhaps most importantly, is that when brain fitness and performance are low or impaired, bad things happen. So mistakes are made, accidents happen. productivity declines. And again, me sat at my desk, I might, I don't know, put a decimal point in a spreadsheet and my forecasts are out, or I'll send an email to a client that I meant to send to a team member or something like that. Nobody's going to die. Whereas in these high risk sectors, the human, the financial, and environmental risks actually, and impacts of low or impaired brain fitness can be catastrophic. People do die. Oil platforms explode. Environmental impact from even things, I mean, again, in the news recently, accidental sewage leaks into Lake Windermere, for example. Human error has been posed as been one part of it. Some people might disagree, but we're not here to talk about that. But those costs, the results of lower impaired brain fitness, can be particularly high. So the demand for a solution, and particularly a low cost, easily deployable one like ours, just makes a lot of sense. So that's still our focus, those sectors. I have to say that whilst that all makes sense from a strategic point of view, in reality, we have found what many people have in the past. Many of these sectors, some more than others, particularly construction, relatively slow to adopt new technology. So whilst the need is there and the demand is there to a degree, the actual deploying has been harder than we would have expected, to be honest, given the level of interest, the discussions we've had. It's certainly slower working with these big companies. So what we're finding at the moment, and what we're calling we're still B2B, but we are adopting a strategy that we call marketing to individuals, but selling to businesses. So we found that individuals who are particularly interested in their own personal health and well-being and performance absolutely love what we're doing to benefit themselves. And they don't have a board to speak to. They don't have a procurement department or process to go through. So it's a much easier and a much faster sell. And as a route to market, it's not uncommon. We've not invented it, but many businesses and brands who are known now as kind of B2B or enterprise solutions started by just getting some really passionate individuals, early adopters, to buy into what they do, build up that army of champions, that army of ambassadors who then can help leverage that into the businesses. So that's the approach that we're adopting now. But it's been, and I wish we'd done it a year and a half ago, to be fair, but it's there was that kind of resistance. It was like, oh, we're going to be spreading ourselves too thinly. We're going to be trying to do B2C, but we really want to be B2B. You can do both. And it's a strategic thing. It's not that we're suddenly a B2C company and a B2B company at the same time. The two work together. That's what we're finding to be really starting to get things moving now. So it's been, yeah, it's good. Things are just getting quite exciting.
I think it's Jeb Blount in his book Sales EQ who talks about selling to bigger organizations and looking at the people who are either physically or metaphorically round the table and understanding where each of them is coming from and what their emotions are. Because, in his case, he was selling sales training, but round that table, you've got everyone from the head of the department who's keen to get their team some training through to the vice president of marketing and sales who sees it as a personal affront that they might need external training, and the finance director who's caring about what the investment level is and so on. And if you've got somebody in that room who's your advocate, he's coming at it from the point of view of identifying emotional intelligence. But it's exactly what you've just identified.
That's exactly it. At the end of the day, and as a marketeer, it's been something that I've always tried to bring into any work we did for businesses, is to avoid that trap that many fall into with B2B marketing and communications, that you suck all the emotion out of it. It just, because you think it's got to be about benefits and ROI. And it's like, yes, it does at some point, because somebody somewhere is going to ask those questions, but you're still selling to people. Like, a business is just a group of people, really. And there's absolutely no reason why you can't have that emotion, that passion, that aspiration, all of these things that you would typically associate with a consumer brand. And some of them in particular, I'm thinking like the Guinness ad with the horses in the sea. You don't even see a pint or anything. You'd like the end, you sort of see that little bit of it kind of filtering as the pint settles, but it's all kind of morphed into the sea. You never see the product. You'd see the brand, but they never show somebody stood at a bar drinking a pint of Guinness. And it's, but I'm not saying you would go that far necessarily with B2B, but there's no reason why you couldn't, to be honest. So yeah, selling to individuals is something which we are finding is working really, really well for us. And because of the nature of the solution, our targeting, our price point kind of self-selects individuals who are likely to be, if not decision makers within a business, then certainly influencers. So they're going to be relatively senior management or possibly even business owners. So it's a great way to introduce it to people, get those champions, but also people who've got genuine influence over making a business decision about this as well. So it's in some ways it's always been what we identified as the route to market. We always knew, just for slightly different reasons actually. So going way back, very first business plan, I talked about the need to drive a push and pull effect. So not just relying on selling to the business and then the management would push this onto workers. That's going to be the least effective way for us to get people on side, to get those workers on side. We're reliant on their consent at the end of the day. This is collecting data, which is pretty personal. And whilst not much of it is shared with the employer and the individual is completely in control of what is shared, it's still a concern. So that we always knew that we would have to get those individuals on side. We'd need to engage with them, ideally before the business introduces us to them, so that they actually want it and pull it into the business. And that's really what we're doing right now. It's just we've in a way we've ended up doing it for slightly different reasons, but it's the same effect. It's the same strategy fundamentally.
It's ultimately it's a real engagement job. I mean, my former life is working in the veterinary world on national disease control, and the sort of accepted standard approach to introducing a new disease control initiative for years has been creating something as a voluntary scheme, and you can get a reasonable, you get your early adopters, and then through them you can get the bulk of the population, usually this is farmers, so it's livestock farmers, on board. And then, because it tends to be government driven stuff, you've got your legislative bit that comes in at the back, which mops up the those who are less enthusiastic, and occasionally you've got the sort of enforcement arm at the back end that brings the last few along. But for something like this, where you're looking to get people to engage with it, to get the best out of it, difficult to see how you could achieve that without them on side.
Exactly. And I think it's why this has always been part of our strategy. We're just implementing it in a slightly different way now, but it still very much fits with that original identification of a challenge and how we intended to tackle that. So it's, yeah, in some ways it's quite reassuring, and it's definitely not it's not a pivot to a B2C audience or anything like that, which as a startup founder, I don't know if I've not really spoken to anybody about this, but I feel it quite acutely, quite personally in a way. That because a pivot to me, it's not a negative thing. It can be quite a brave thing to do, actually, if it's at the right time. So I'm not saying that pivoting is a bad thing, but it seems to be what everybody instantly leaps to if you talk about doing something that they perhaps hadn't understood was how you were going to approach it. Like, oof, was that a pivot? Is that a pivot? And like, no, it's not a pivot. It's a tactical, strategic move to get to where we want to be. And I think, yeah, I get quite defensive about it in a way. That's probably on me, but yeah, it's definitely something which we're finding is working now, which is great. And ultimately, we're about selling stuff, to be honest. So as a business, for myself, for the team, for our investors, you shouldn't be afraid to pivot. You shouldn't be afraid to sell whatever you've got to whoever seems to want to buy it quickest and in greatest volumes, even if it's completely different to where you thought you might originally be. That's I've got no. I have been known in the past, and I should put it on now, or else people won't recognize me on this video. A hard hat, because our sectors have traditionally been focused in on high risk hard hat sectors. So I was like, oh, the hard hat guy, and it was great at pitch events and networking events because a little bit of theatre, somebody to recognize you by, and that's great. But then I was also like, that's not all we are. I don't want to be defined by this hard hat. But it can be useful if we suddenly see construction buying this in droves, then we will turn our attention to them. But equally, if we see business executives who care about their own health and well-being and performance, and what we're seeing at the minute is, rather than it being a kind of a safety and a well-being tool, it's much more about performance. People want to perform better. They want to be able to perform to the best of their abilities, no matter what life or work throws at them. So it's not because stress, fatigue, been stuck at your desk for too long each day. You can manage it, and we should minimize it, and we should all be conscious of it, but it's not going away. And if you choose, like I've chosen the startup life, partly because it's hard, actually. That's partly why I do it. So I know I've already had it. There's been stress. There's been lack of sleep. There's been like 12, 14-hour days where I don't move from this chair. That's not going to be good for me long term. So I do need to be aware of that and to take steps to manage it. But equally, I also want to be able to manage and improve my own fitness, my own brain fitness and strength and resilience and performance, so that I'm better able to cope with those challenges which life and work are throwing at me, or in this case, I'm choosing to take on. And that's where we're seeing a lot of interest in what we do. It's because it's a little bit different. It's saying stress isn't this evil thing that we need to eliminate from our lives and wrap everybody in cotton wool. It's like resilience and strength and performance. That's where we are.
We all perform better with an element of stress in our existence. It's getting the balance so that, if you don't have enough stress or enough challenge, then you get disengaged because you haven't got something to push you on. But if you've got too much stress, then it's overwhelming and it degrades performance. So
yeah, the different terms and as well from the sort of the clinical psychology point of view, but people talk about pressure versus stress, which is useful, I suppose. But I always find that the simplest and most clear cut thing is stress is not a bad thing in itself. Distress is bad. we know if you are distressed, that's not good. Stress isn't distress. It can lead to that, but it's not in itself bad. So that's how I always tend to look at it. And everybody's different. Every brain's different at the end of it, and we treat every brain differently. We don't care age, gender, neurodiversity. We and our solution treats everybody exactly the same, and we're not comparing one person to another. We're just helping people to understand their own fluctuations so that they can manage and improve and be the best they can be, the best version of themselves. God, I sound like Stephen Bartlett or something like that. But that's what it's all about, is helping people to be the best they can be. Yeah.
So what's next? You're out there bringing your ambassadors on, taking the product to market. What's next?
So the next big milestone for us is introducing our own wearable. So at the moment, we have the BrainFit platform, which has been built to ingest data from both our own wearable, which is looking at the brain, but also from devices that people already have, like Apple Watches and Fitbits, Garmin's and Oura Rings and all sorts of things. And we can provide insights into brain fitness and performance when people are providing data, integrating data from both, from ours and third party, or just one or the other. And the way that we can do it using data just from wrist-worn devices is best described as, when we're looking at the brain using our device, we are measuring the impact of certain factors like stress or lack of sleep. We're measuring the impact on the brain. When we don't have this, but we have wrist-worn devices, we're measuring those factors, and we can then extrapolate, because of our understanding of the brain, we can then provide insights into what the impacts of those factors will be, we believe, on the brain, which is why we can still provide these insights into brain fitness and performance, even when all we've got is wrist-worn data. So that's what we have live at the moment. That's what we have paying customers benefiting from, and we're starting to grow that. But introducing our own hardware, our own device at scale. So we've got prototypes that people have tried, the research, demos, and so on. Moving to volume manufacture and introducing those devices is the next big milestone. That's where we'll be providing our full solution, our vision, if you like, and our genuinely innovative solution to, we focused in on, we would still define it as workplace well-being, but the potential of the technology to address all sorts of problems, including in the sort of medical and healthcare space as well. Long-term potential is absolutely huge. I mean, it's genuinely transformational technology. So that's long-term, but we focus on what's in front of us just now, and getting that device into manufacturers the real focus. Hardware's hard. I do sometimes wish I'd just come up with an idea for an app. That would have been I probably would have exited by now. I probably would have had it launched 3 years ago and exited this year. So, but yeah, hardware is exciting, and it's hard. Like I said before, that's part of why I enjoy doing it, because of the challenge and doing something that nobody's done before.
Yes. Well, I'm sure we'll look out for seeing the hardware out there.
Won't be
And
long. Won't be long.
yeah, we wish you every success in getting this out there, and reducing the level of harm, increasing the level of good that comes to people as a result.
It's I was on a call with somebody this morning, and he was very complimentary. Actually, it was a really good call where he said, look, the world needs this. It's not businesses need it, the world needs it. It will save lives, literally. And it's that is part of what gets us out of bed in the morning as a team. It wasn't, as I was saying before, it wasn't the original problem or opportunity. It wasn't the original kind of purpose, if you like. It was very much a commercial opportunity, but you can't help but work in this space and do what we do without becoming really purpose-led to make people's lives better. So that is what gets us out of bed in the morning as well, even when things are hard. And the BrainFit platform, obviously, that helps too.
Yes, well, keep getting out of bed in the morning. Best of luck with that. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure.